They want you to forget about the pandemic. Isn't it like the pandemic never happened? Isn't it like it's like it just all went away in an instant as soon as the war in Ukraine started? In an instant, mask mandates started going away, masking in schools started going away. We started to forget that we had ever been through 2 years of nonsense and lockdowns and mandates in the first place. But according to the New York Times, it's okay. We all just need to move on. We all just need to forget that they tried to shut down an entire world fucking economy for 2 fucking years. We will forget much of the pandemic, and that's a good thing. That is like the most perfect image ever. Look at that. And I mean, they actually think that getting their readers, who they have all freaked out with fear porn for the last 2 years, to get over this and move on with life, they literally think this is how easy it is. This is not going to be forgotten. People are not going to move on. That's not the way addiction works. And everyone who's been reading and swallowing everything that the New York Times has said for the past 2 years, you don't just get to go in with a vacuum cleaner in people's heads and make believe that it never happened in the first place. As we approach another anniversary of the pandemic's onset, many of us are reflecting on the past 2 years and thinking about the ways the virus altered our lives. More than 950,000 Americans have died. Many more have lost a loved one, and millions are still grappling with the lingering after effects of infection. As we begin to move towards oh, hang on, I need to take a drink. Sorry, guys. Still congested, all that stuff. It's like I remember the times when the only thing you could get during the winter to get sick was COVID. Can we go back to those times, please, where I didn't get COVID all winter, but I also never got anything else? I would really appreciate that. All right, let's try again. As we begin to move towards a post-pandemic future, it is vital that we remember the toll this virus has taken. The lessons of this pandemic should be carried with us so that, unlike what happened after the 1918 flu, it doesn't fade from history. And so we can honor and memorialize those we have lost. Can we also honor and memorialize the learning loss that's happened over the last 2 years? Can we also honor and memorialize the increased rates of self-harm that have happened, especially among young people over the last couple of years? Can we also honor and memorialize the fact that we are going to experience a massive mental health crisis in a couple of years, the likes of which we've never seen, purely because these people pushed fear porn on the entire population for 2 years in order to win political elections? Can we also honor and memorialize all those things? Not a single one of us should ever forget what these people tried to put us through. Not a single one of us should ever forget that 15 days to slow the spread turned into 2 fucking years of bullshit that is still not completely over. Canada was seizing bank accounts from people not too long ago. Let's just remember that. That you had to get medicine that you didn't want injected into your body in order to keep your job, in order to go out to eat, in order to live your life in the most basic ways. None of us should ever forget what these people tried to do to us. And if you think they're not going to try it again in some other way, dude, they're not going to give up that easily. Come on, they're just going to move into a different tactic. We never should have done 15 days to slow the spread in the first place. That was inherently part of the problem. It is also inevitable that over time, many of our memories of these difficult years will fade. As a neuroscientist who studies memory and memory disorders like Alzheimer's, I find this fact, perhaps counterintuitively, comforting. I've come to understand through new research that there is a danger in remembering too much, and that forgetting is not only normal, but in fact necessary for our mental health. Let's just think about that entire paragraph for a second. Oh, I can't. Oh, it's not letting me highlight. Let's just think about that. This guy is actually saying, it's better just to forget. Why don't you just forget? Why don't you just move on with life? My tattoo artist, I started getting this sick tattoo on my arm like 4 months ago. And in our first session, my tattoo artist was talking about how right after the election, when it was clear that Biden was going to become president, he started talking about the fact that he started seeing on like leftist media them telling their audience, "You don't care about politics anymore. You can just go back to sleep now. It's okay. Haven't you had enough politics?" So leftist media was literally telling their audience, "Aren't you tired of politics? Don't you just want to go back to normal life? Do you really need to worry about this stuff anymore?" These were cues they were sending their audience right after the election in 2020 to make them go back to sleep. They woke them up when they wanted everyone to be against Trump. They woke them up when they wanted everyone to be engaging in fear porn against COVID. And then as soon as they got what they wanted, they were like, just forget. I've come to understand through new research that there is a danger in remembering too much and that forgetting is not only normal, but in fact necessary for our mental health. Just go back to sleep. It'll all be okay as long as you go back to sleep. It used to be thought that forgetting anything, from minor things like the name of casual acquaintances to the more painful loss of cherished memories experienced by my patients, was caused, to varying degrees, by a failure of one's brain's memory and mechanisms. So, new developments in neuroscience over the past decade or so refute this simple idea. Neurons contain what are sometimes called nanomachines that are dedicated to the construction of new memories, but scientists have recently discovered that neurons are also endowed with a completely different set of nanomachines designed for the opposite purpose: to carefully disassemble and thus forget components of our stored memories. In light of this new and growing body of research, normal everyday forgetting can no longer be thought of as a malfunction of our memory machinery. Instead, it can be considered a healthy, adaptive part of our brain's normal functioning. Memory and forgetting work in unison. We depend on our memory to record, to learn, to recall, and we depend on forgetting to countervail, to sculpt, and to squelch our memories. This balancing act is, as it turns out, vital for our cognitive functioning, creativity, and mental health. They are actually arguing that forgetting about the pandemic is just what everyone needs, because that's what they want. They want us all to just forget. So that the next time something happens and someone goes, just 15 days to slow the spread, we're all going to be like, okay, we'll just do 15 days. It's just 15 days. How bad could it be? We all have to make sure that people do not forget this, guys. That's the truth. People, it is the responsibility of everyone to make sure that what these people have tried to do to our society over the last couple of years is never forgotten, is never put on the back burner. So they're never allowed to do this sort of thing again. Savrits, thank you for the super chat. It's becoming the void of truth and reason. That's exactly right. Of course, there are unhealthy kinds of forgetting. Alzheimer's disease, for one, targets memory mechanisms and causes them to fail. But in disorders, it appears that the brain's forgetting mechanisms break down. The psychological condition that perhaps best exemplifies what can happen when people don't forget properly is PTSD. Oh, so now they're actually saying that if you don't forget, you're going to experience trauma. While it is often beneficial to remember the facts of traumatic experiences, sometimes even in the pointless details, it is equally, if not more important to the healing process to let the emotional valence of it fade. If we don't, we get stuck in total emotional recall, reviving our distress in perpetuity. Forgetting protects us from the destabilizing anxiety by deleting memories, but not by deleting memories, but by quieting their emotional scream. Just not for nothing, I've been watching a lot of Scientology videos lately. I used to be like obsessed with how crazy Scientology was, and then I started watching other things, and the world ended up turning out to be much more crazy than Scientology. But I was watching some Scientology videos over the past couple days, and you know what I've realized? This is exactly what they do in Scientology. When they're putting people through the process of like auditing, and they have them hold on to those two cans, and they're asking them to talk about painful memories. This is exactly what they're doing in Scientology. Scientology is a cult. It is. I'm sorry if there are Scientologists listening, but you're in a cult and you really should. That's not to say you can't get benefit from it, man, but like, it's not a good thing. Anyway, this is literally what Scientology does. Forgetting protects us from debilitating anxiety, not by deleting memories, but by quieting their emotional scream. Deborah says, as a specialist in trauma therapy, I don't agree with these statements. There is utility to remembering processing the trauma. Yes, I agree. The same is true of more run of the mill emotions. Intuitively, it makes sense that we sometimes need to let go of hurt and resentment to preserve close friendships, and that we need to forget in order to forgive. Letting go is one of the many colloquialisms that implicitly nod in recognition and gratitude towards our brain's forgetting mechanism. Well, dude, like, I'm going to be honest. I'm a big fan of forgiving. I don't think that holding on to hate or anger or any of these things does you any good, but you don't forget. It is fine to forgive. That is not the same as forgetting what happened in the first place, because if you forget what happened in the first place, you are doomed to repeat it again and again and again and again. In patients with PTSD, the area of the brain that stores fear memories is highly active, suggesting that an individual cannot properly engage with the brain's fear forgetting system with the memory of a traumatic event. Complex disorders should not be oversimplified. But it is possible to think about PTSD as a disorder stemming from too much memory caused by an inability to forget a traumatic experience in a healthy way. Turning down activity in the brain, a region effectively induces a healthy ability to forget feelings of fear. Drugs like MDMA do just that and are being tested as a treatment for PTSD. Some couples therapists have even used MDMA to accelerate the forgetting and forgiving process in their patients. Wait, is the New York Times saying that couples therapy is having people who are going to couples therapy take ecstasy as a way of reconnecting in their marriage? Holy shit. This is like a whole different article now. They're actually, I don't actually think this is a bad suggestion, if I'm honest. They're actually suggesting that couples take ecstasy as a form of couples counseling. Wow. Yes, I bet that does work. I bet that does help couples to reconnect quite handily. I bet that is actually very effective. From testimonials of recreational users, quieting fear-related memories is apparently so potent in its pro-social effects, making people friendlier, more compassionate, even more loving. Yes, I suspect that if you have people taking ecstasy, they will become more loving, as it turns out. Of course, we won't and shouldn't forget the pandemic. In addition to memorializing the loss of our loved ones, we should commemorate the selfless commitment of our healthcare workers and rewrite our government and medical manuals so that we are able to better respond better and faster next time. But for many of us, particularly those on the front line, this guy is like a neuroscientist and he thinks he's like a frontline worker. Some degree of emotional forgetting will be a natural part of living in and moving forward from the pandemic. As a society, one of the most beneficial ways we can do more forward in a healthy way will be to resume safe socializing. Several studies have shown that social isolation exacerbates the negative effects of trauma. Dude, it's like what we've been telling you for the past 2 years. Because this pandemic required us to socially isolate. Well, it didn't require you to socially isolate. You made the decision to socially isolate. We couldn't make use of the most psychologically beneficial coping mechanism, getting together. One of the greatest risk factors for PTSD in troops is when, shortly after trauma, they find themselves socially isolated, their minds exposed without the social fabric to protect them from the lashing loops of their fear and dread. Not every observation about the mind needs a neurological explanation, but it is nonetheless true that socializing causes our brain to secrete chemicals like oxytocin, which, similarly to MDMA, induces fear forgetting. Gazing into each other's eyes is all that is needed for oxytocin to be simultaneously secreted in the gazer and the gazed upon, a feedback loop that induces a socially uplifting pas de deux. Let's see. Are we actually going to talk about the pandemic? All right, we're almost done. We can predict that when it's safe to do so, relaxing the recommendations for social isolation and encouraging people to get together at work, in schools, and social venues will reduce the risk of long lasting distress. I just want to emphasize again, no one forced you to socially isolate. I'm sorry, I was traveling throughout 2020. No one forced you to socially isolate. People were still traveling. People were still going out and doing stuff. People were still getting together. Many people were not scared. No one was forcing you to socially isolate. That is something that you did to yourself. With luck in the months and years ahead, the threat of the virus will abate. I mean, I think for most of us it already had abated. And we will be able to let go of the fear. For many of us have been a near constant companion over the last two. Dude, this article's literally saying that fear has been a near constant companion. That is sick and twisted. With hope, the terrifying images of the pandemic's ravages, the empty streets and crowded hospitals, the funerals and freezer trucks will cease to loom so large in our collective memory. Forgetting some of the, well, I'm going to say this too, because I was traveling and actually living my life throughout the pandemic, I actually don't have any of these bad memories. My bad memories, and let me know if this is true of you in the chat, my bad memories are all around people like this that tried to force everyone to stay in their house for 2 years, that tried to force everyone to take medicine that many of them didn't want, that tried to other an entire percentage of the population, call them anti-vaxxers, purely because they disagreed. Those are the bad memories that I have, not around being isolated, because I wasn't isolated, because I made the decision not to be isolated. And everyone else could have made exactly the same decision. If you were isolated for the entirety of the last 2 years, that is a prison that you created for yourself. No one created that prison for you. You created that for yourself. With hope, the terror. Oh, I already read that. Forgetting some of the fear will allow us to more clearly recall the details we want to remember. For me, those include the astonishing resilience, bravery, and collective spirit that emerged 2 years ago this week as my hometown became the epicenter of this pandemic. These memories make me hopeful for the future. And that's it. I think really the most interesting part of this article for me is learning that ecstasy is being used for couples therapy. How fascinating is that? Guys, if you're enjoying the stream so far, please mount that like button for me. As a reminder, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I will be having Dr. Howard Asher on. We're going to continue this great conversation that we started. This is like a part 2 of the conversation about the psychology behind why people are so damn crazy. I'm really going to be thinking about the couples that are taking ecstasy as part of couples counseling. I'm not joking about that. But maybe Howard can provide some insight into that, because Howard knows about trauma therapy as well. And then on Wednesday, instead of going live at 5, we're going to be going live around 6:15, because Wednesday night is our next spy stream. And we're going to be watching a webinar live from the Center of Anti-Racist Education about anti-racist educators and what they're doing in the classroom. It's like they just talk about it live on the internet. So we're going to be doing that at 6:15-ish on Wednesday. Naruto says, have you noticed that Putin cured the media of Fauci? Where the hell has Fauci been lately? Where has he been at all? Who really knows?